Today we're going to talk about how to handle teamwork as a developer, and specifically some of the issues around a bunch of people working in the same repository and version and source control and all of that kind of thing. How to make that process a little bit easier and what to look out for. The whole reason behind this video is that I talked to some people that, maybe are in a coding boot camp or self-teaching, and they're used to just working on their own in their own repos and maybe not even making pull requests, but just kind of having like a dev branch maybe and just making commits there and pushing and not really having to consider what it would be like if they were to work with somebody else or maybe even a big team. Often coding boot camps will have kind of like a team project or a group project type of deal, and for a lot of people that's going to be their first time having to consider what it is like to work with other people in a development environment. So I've got 3 areas to discuss. Those are planning, communication, and acceptance. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so number 1, planning. This can happen in a lot of different ways. So if you're doing a group project for a boot camp or something like that, that could just be planning among your team. If you're in a professional environment, this could be in actual sprint planning or something like this. But the idea here is basically to consider what work needs to be done and how to do it in such a way to have the least amount of conflicts. So if you're a front-end developer working in React, so the idea here could be if you're a React developer, maybe you're just working on one component that is isolated, and so you're not going to have conflicts with anybody else on the team. They could also look like sequencing your work. So if you know that somebody else's work is going to rely on work you're doing, coming up with a plan as a team to keep everybody moving forward while you're finishing your piece and then handing it off to somebody else. Basically, the whole idea here is that you're thinking ahead and trying to figure out where potential blockers could be or where we might be stepping on each other's toes that might cause merge conflicts or other problems down the road. So let's talk about communication. So it kind of goes along with planning, our last point, but communication is super key in a development team. So communication could look a lot of different ways. It could look like saying, hey guys, I just made an update to the API, so you want to go ahead and pull dev to get the latest. It could look like giving people advanced warning that you're going to make some breaking changes and that they'll want to go ahead and not push for a second until your changes get in. It could look like giving people a heads up, hey, I just made a PR and it looks like it's a lot of files, but really you should only be concerned with these 3 or 4 files and the rest are automatically generated, or whatever the situation happens to be. Like planning, a lot of this stuff comes down to trying to think ahead to what could cause problems and making sure that everyone is on the same page. Now, I give all this advice with the goal of avoiding big problems and merge conflicts and stuff like that, but sometimes it's unavoidable, and that brings us to our last point, which is acceptance. So the sooner you can accept that merge conflicts and other issues are going to happen and learn to deal with them, I think probably the better your life is going to be. It can be easy to kind of get scared or think that everything's broken when you have a merge conflict and you see all these choices that you have to make and all this kind of thing, but I think it is just part of working on a team. And maybe the first few times are intimidating or difficult or scary, but I think the more you do it, the more you just get used to it, and it kind of builds on the rest of what we've talked about, right? So communication is important, knowing which changes to keep is important, and the way that you do that is through planning and communication. It's just kind of inevitable that the more people you have working on a code base and the more activity there is, that there's going to be some kind of conflict somewhere down the line. So make sure you're communicating, make sure you're planning, make sure you're not committing those little dashes and arrows that happen when there's a merge conflict, and you will be good to go. So I hope you found this helpful. Thanks so much for watching to the end. If you're still here, you'd probably like the rest of my channel, which focuses on code, self-improvement, and personal finance. So consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.